After sharing the Latoya Ammon's true story, I wanted to share a few things that went on in my life, real life things. I found it odd that people really didn't believe Latoya based on her appearance, which I found interesting. An entity, a haunting, spirits, whatever you call it, is not based on your appearances and your finances. I don't believe that the unknown is snobby and racist and turns their nose up at you because you lack certain things. I don't. But before I begin my true story, a little bit about my background in case you haven't really, seen too many of my videos. I do say bits and pieces of, certain situations that have happened to me. So, the people that are closest to me, a few friends, definitely family, they all know that I'm going to say from as young as me being around 6 or 7, I've always been dealing with, the unknown. And back in the 80s, it it was not like it is now. You have more of ways to see certain things. Like back in the day, the only thing that really dealt with the unknown besides horror movies that was so-called based on true stories, the only thing that dealt with the unknown, spirits and other things, was like Miss Cleo and like Latoya Jackson's Psychic Network or Philip Michael Thomas Psychic Network. Pathetic, right? I know. But those were the only things you couldn't get on a computer and research things like you can do now. There wasn't reality shows that, whether I believe them or not, brings, I'm going to say, awareness to the situation. It wasn't really nothing like that at all. And the only thing that I could do is maybe reach out to, you know, um, a pastor in a Catholic church, or I mean, a priest in a Catholic church, and speak to them because that was close by me. And they just listened. I guess that's what they do, right? But enough about that. Enough about that. So, my then boyfriend and I decided to move to another state for a fresh start. And I looked on the computer at the time and I found this rent to own home in Phoenix City, Alabama. So we, on Thanksgiving Day, along with I think my son was 12 at the time, we decided to, on Thanksgiving again, we decided to pack up and head to Phoenix City, Alabama to see this house. We had an appointment to see it. We were all ready to go. We were ready to go. I was hoping that it looked just as good as it did on the internet than it would look when I got to the house. That's the only thing I was hoping. So on our way up, we stopped at on Highway 280. It was a Pizza Hut, and that's where we had our Thanksgiving dinner. I remember that like it was yesterday, seriously. That's where we had our Thanksgiving dinner. And that Pizza Hut is now like some type of hibachi place. It changed over about maybe 2 years ago. It had been empty for a while. We got to the house I thought the house. Now remember, I'm not from around here. I'm not from around here at the time. I don't know anything. I'm just following my boyfriend's lead because he's a southerner. He's from around here. So I'm following his lead to where we're going. I don't even know if he was familiar with this area at the time, but when we got there, I was under the impression that the house that I wanted was in Phoenix City. Now the guy said, "Oh, that's another house. That's another house he had." Randomly, we were at a house in Columbus, Georgia. Now we're tired. It's Thanksgiving. We have a whole entire 1999 U-Haul truck filled with stuff, and then another truck that we're actually driving in, filled with basically all my belongings. And we're tired. We're just ready to move into something. Now, my then boyfriend, he pulls out a wad of cash and he gives the down payment and like a couple months rent ahead of time. It was beautiful. No credit checks back then. It was beautiful. So he put down what we needed to get into the property. It was a 3-bedroom, 1-bathroom, nice sized living room, nice sized kitchen, and new appliances in the kitchen. The house was kind of old school, kind of old fashioned, I guess. Not really a shotgun house that they have here, but it was okay. I was young. This was our fresh start. So this is where we were going to be. So we moved in and got everything situated, and everything was fine. Now, the fresh start turned into not be such a fresh start. You can take a cheater out of the town that they're currently in and you move them into another town. It's just a whole variety there of cheating. Just to put it how it is. Hey, it is what it is. So I'm not going to say that I was innocent in all this either. I'm not going to say I was. But this was supposed to be our fresh start. And it wasn't. It really wasn't. So situations had occurred where he ended up getting arrested and he had to go to jail, which now left me in this house with my 12-year-old son. My boyfriend at the time was the breadwinner, and now he's incarcerated. I don't know when he's getting out. I had no means of money. I didn't know what to do. I did have my truck there, so I had to now try to branch out and find a job, which I did at a buffet style type place that has also since closed down and turned into something else. But I started to work there and to try to bring in some type of money, to keep the rent going. We had rent, we had lights, we had water. I mean, it was a lot. Plus, I also had 4 dogs. They were outside, 4 dogs, and my dogs ended up leaving. They ended up having to go. I couldn't, and it crushed me because I'm a big animal lover, but I couldn't afford anything. I was on a waitress salary. My rent at the time, I believe the rent was $550 or $450. I think it was $450, right? Oh my God, beautiful, right? It was $450, and but I couldn't afford them, and they had got out. They kept getting out of the gate. And finally, I think the animal shelter here came and picked them up. I could have eventually went and got them, but I couldn't afford even the fees to get them back home. So it was very sad. I remember I had to tell my son, they have the dogs. And he's like, you can't get them. I don't have the money to get them. I remember that. I still think about those dogs. Fiona, Rosemary, Damien, and Blair. All named after horror stories or horror movies because, again, everybody knows I love horror movies and name them all after horror movies, except Fiona. She didn't have the horror movie name, but her children, those are Fiona's kids. Her kids had Damien, Blair, and Rosemary. Yep, they had. So I hated that they had to go. Still have pictures of those dogs, but I couldn't afford them. So now I'm just trying to get on with my life. It seems that my boyfriend at the time, he was going to be in jail for a minute. He was quite the something. He was quite the something, and I had to figure out, what to do with myself. Now, I didn't know it at the time. Now okay. I'm trying. Please bear with me with this story. I'm thinking off my head, but and things are just popping into my head. So I'm trying to just give you parts of the story that you need to really hear to understand what was going on. Several months had passed by, and I'm a big cook. And I love to cook all type of things. But for some reason in this house, I only cooked white rice, no butter, no salt, and I made sugarless tea. Disgusting. That's a disgusting meal. That's like a jailhouse meal, right? That's literally a jailhouse meal. While I'm talking to you guys right now, I'm drinking a hot cup of tea right now. But that's like a jailhouse meal. But that's what I was preparing for my son and I. And when I even talk to him, later on, like when we reminisce about things, and I'm like, why didn't you ever say anything? He doesn't even know why he ever said, like, mommy, like, why do you keep making this nasty rice and tea? But this is what I was preparing for a while. I lost a lot of weight. I mean, didn't even know it. Didn't even know it till my jeans couldn't fit. They were literally falling off me. I needed a belt, and I don't wear belts, and I needed a belt. I had lost so much weight. I think like 2 or 3 months, all I had was sugarless tea and rice. And no, this is not a diet plan, but that's what I drank, and I lost a huge amount of weight. And I can't recall being very big at that time to have lost so much weight, but I did. I did. My child did too, because this is really all I was preparing. He had made friends with our neighbors' kids across the street. They're around his age, a few years older, a few years younger, but he made friends with them. So he would go over there a lot, and then he would also come right back across the street a lot and stay home. Now, one of the occurrences I remember, the room that I stayed in, it didn't have a natural AC, I guess, like it I had a air conditioner unit in the window that really never got the house cool enough. I remember it. I ended up getting a box fan too, which didn't do shit neither. That house was extremely, extremely hot in there. It was. The room that I had, I would wake up sometimes, my neck was sweaty. The sheets were wet from me sweating. It was horrible. It was just so horrible during the summer. And I didn't stay in that house for longer than a year. So it was just really, really horrible in that house with the heat and stuff. However, in my son's room, my son didn't have air conditioning in there. He didn't have a fan. He didn't have an AC unit in his room, but his room was very cold, which was weird. And I noted that around the time. It was weird that my room is very hot and your room is very cold. Remember, he used to always scream out at night. He was having these bad nightmares to where sometimes I would come in there and look at him to make sure he was okay. And I'd be like, Ty, you okay? You okay? And he's half asleep and he looks at me like, like how you wake your kid up out the bed and their eyes are like all watery and red and they're looking at you like, why are you waking them up? But he was okay and he went right back to sleep. So I thought it was like a nightmare or something. But it happened several more times. It was happening like 2, 3 times a week where he was having these nightmares. And in the morning when I would, wake him up and I would talk to him, I'd be like, what did you dream last night? And he'd be like, oh, I don't remember. So he didn't even recall these nightmares that he had. And I remember another time he was in his room and he was sleeping, and all of a sudden I heard glass and my child just screaming. I got up and ran to his room, and it seemed the window had shattered in on him. We had to call the ambulance, and he sat in the ambulance truck, and they pretty much was checking him to make sure he was okay. He did not have to go to the hospital or anything. They treated him right there. It was just the glass; it had shattered, and he was in the bed laying down. He was sleeping, so we don't know how that happened. I ended up calling the landlord and telling the landlord what happened with the glass. And I remember the landlord said to me, you know, because at this time his friends were like outside the house. He said, "What was his friends banging on the window?" I'm like, "No, his friends was not banging on the window." And if you could see it, the glass did shatter in. It was some glass inside the house. It was some glass outside the house, but more inside on his room. I was like, "No, no, the glass did not shatter inside." His kids, I'm sorry, the neighbors. I said, "No, the neighbors' kids did not bang on the window. They did not do that. It was late. They were at home with their mom. They was not over playing around the window to where they broke it or nothing. The glass shattered in on my child." Sometime later, I think it was maybe the next day or later on that night, I was outside sitting on the porch. I think my son had stayed over with the neighbors because we had some bags up against the window. They were going to come and fix the window. So my son stayed across the street with the neighbors. And I was just sitting on the porch. It's hot. It's stuffy inside the house. Even though it's hot and stuffy outside the house, at least there's like a little bit of breeze I was getting. And I remember sitting out there, and a woman from across the street, an older woman that I didn't know, never spoke to, she came across the street and she asked me what happened. And I said, "Oh, the glass had shattered in, on my son." And she said, "A little boy died in that house." That's what she said to me. And I said, "What did he die of?" She said, "I think of cancer." Now, it's been so long ago since this happened. I kid you not, oh my God, it's been so long ago, like over 15, 20 years ago. So I can't remember, verbatim what she said, but I do remember her saying that the little boy in the house died of cancer, and he died in the home. I remember I specifically asked her that, and he died in the home. Now, before I continue with the story, there's a pull-out. You know the pull-out addicts that you pull like a little string or a little rope or something, and you can go up some very narrow steps to an addict. I remember when we first got the house, I had asked the landlord at the time. I must say the landlord he was a cool guy. He was a cool Caucasian guy. He was probably in his late to early 30s. Definitely, definitely. Very nice guy. Very nice guy. And I remember asking him, I said, "Can I use that upstairs for another room?" And I remember he said, "I wouldn't go up there. I wouldn't, even walk up there." He said, "This house is probably older than you, and I wouldn't want you falling through, the ceiling. So I wouldn't advise, you to go up there." That's what he said. And it just went out of my mind. I didn't think about that. Never thought about that at all. So back to the story now. My son's window is now getting fixed. I did hear about a boy passing away of cancer, inside the house. Now, my son's room is extremely cold. It started to have like a very glistening, I would say the walls looked like it was sweating to me. That's how I would describe it. It was very clear, very glistening. It's like you took like a sprinkler hose on sprinkle setting and you just sprayed the wall with it. That's what it reminded me. I've never touched it. I just would go in his room and notice that. You know, Please, guys, forgive me. I was very young. I've had paranormal experiences in my life, but not quite one that involved a house. So I didn't really know what was going on in that room. My cat, Wednesday at the time, he was with me, and I remember my cat never wanted to go in my room or my son's room, and my cat always slept with me or my son. Sometimes me and my son would fight over who Wednesday was going to sleep at the end of the bed with. But Wednesday wouldn't go in either one of these rooms. He would stay kind of by the kitchen. The way the house was laid out, he would stay by the kitchen. If I can get some inside pictures, they might be online. I'm going to look. I will show you kind of what the inside of the house looks like. But he would stay in between like the kitchen where he can like look at me sleeping and look at my son sleeping, but he would stay there. He would sometimes maybe be in the living room, but he would not really venture out throughout the house. And that's not really what Wednesday did. Wednesday was everywhere where we moved different places, but he would just stay right there. Wednesday was eating his regular food, thank goodness, and Wednesday didn't get sick or anything like that, but he just wouldn't go into any of these rooms, which when I look at it now, it is very strange that he did not go into any of these rooms. I remember one evening, my son was across the street again. It was a good thing my son stayed out a lot away from the house as much as he could. I don't think he did it intentionally. Just think he wanted to be around the new friends that he met other than, being, at home with his mom in this very hot house. I remember I clicked on my light switch and the ceiling caught on fire completely. And I remember it just looked like the whole ceiling of my room was engulfed in flames. I cut the light switch off immediately, and it just went out. It just went out. I called the fire department, and I waited for them outside on the porch. When they got there, it was like 3 or 4 big firefighter guys. They came in, and I explained to them the story. I cut my light switch on, and the ceiling was engulfed in flames. And the firefighter guy, one of the firemen, he just flipped the switch up, and I was nervous, but nothing happened. He said, I can clearly smell smoke in this house. He was like, maybe it's an electrical, something happened with the electrical circuits or something. I said, no, it was fire, and it smelled like it was very bad. The smell was intense, like a fire had happened. Nothing was damaged at all. He said, my advice to you would be maybe to get a hotel room, call your landlord, because he saw I was really scared to stay in there. I was scared that, something else was going to happen. He said, get a hotel room. I didn't have money for a hotel room. He said, call the landlord. I can't remember if I called the landlord or not. I can't remember, but I'm just telling you guys bits and pieces of stuff that had happened, in that house. Now, my boyfriend at the time, he is still incarcerated, and I met another guy. When you're young, you move on. But a friendly type guy I'd met at the time, and he stayed over a few times, no big deal. When I got a chance to talk to my boyfriend, who was now out of jail, but he was no longer staying with me in Columbus. He stayed elsewhere, and I was still here in Columbus, and I was telling him about what was going on with the house. And so now, ultimately, I would end up getting evicted from the house. I couldn't afford to pay the $450 rent, along with, utilities, along with, paying somebody to cut the grass, do the hedges and stuff, buying food, paying my car note, insurance, taking care of my son on my own, all on a waitress salary. I wasn't able to do it. I think the job at the time was paying like $5 something, and I would make good tips, but I couldn't afford to keep up the house. So my son, who was very close friends now with the people across the street from us, I was going to go back to Alabama and, stay with my dad for a while until I decided what I was going to do. My son had got really close to them. Oh, can I stay? School had started. He wanted to go to school with them. And long story short, I ended up being very good friends with their mother. We became really cool. And we all stayed in the house. And I think I got like an apartment not too far away from them, several months later. But now back to the house. It's still open. It was available. Nobody had moved in yet. And my ex-boyfriend was now out of jail. And, he had we had called me. We were talking on the phone. And I was telling him about, the things that was going on in the house. Because now I'm freaked out. I'm already out the house and I'm just reflecting on everything that had happened. I'm like, that house stayed hot and cold in each room individually. The dogs are all gone now. You know, um, I told him the glass had came in and, cut my son up. A little boy died of cancer in there. I was telling him everything. And he said, you know, um, did you check the attic? And I'm like, the attic? He's like, yeah, did you find out if those statues are worth anything in the attic? You know, I'm like, statues in the attic? He's like, yeah. No, I didn't. I never looked in the attic. He told me to find out if those statues are worth something. He said he had took one to a pawn shop. I think he got a couple dollars for it, but he said you can probably make some money off those statues in the attic. So my then boyfriend, who isn't scared of anything at all, right? He has his lighter on him because the house is dark now. The house is dark, and I think there was a little bit of light outside. It might have been like going into the evening where you still have that little grayish outside. So we opened the door and I said, go look and see if there are statues in the attic. So I'm watching him as he goes up the little steps to head up to the attic. And he's like, I can't see anything. I can't see anything. And I said, do you have your lighter with you? So he goes in his pocket, he gets his lighter, and the minute he, flicks his lighter on and he looks up, this dude just drops down. He doesn't go down the steps one at a time, holding on. He just drops. And as he's walking past me, he says, let's go. That's what he says to me. I'm looking at him like, what's up there? Let's go. The guy that I'm seeing that's not scared of anything, that's willing to fight anybody at any time at the drop of a hat, that looks for the biggest person, drops down, drops completely down. I'm like, what's going on? He said, no, it's nothing up there. He wouldn't even tell me. I can't recall me pressing it, but he said it was nothing up there. But it just was kind of weird to me that why would you drop like that and literally walk past me, let's go? Very strange, very strange, very strange at all. So I was just very intrigued of what was going on in that house. Seriously, I had to know. I really, really, really had to know. As scared as I am, as scared as I was, I had to know. So I'm outside the house contemplating looking in that attic. I'm by myself. And I just, the house is still empty. And I'm walking around and there's like a crawl space. I see a small statue. I see a very small statue. The statue had to be about maybe 8 inches, 9 inches long. The statue, a very weird looking statue. I've never seen it before. Very weird in like some type of fake gold plated look. It was very strange looking to me. And when I looked under the crawl space, it was literally hundreds of them, and they were all lined up underneath the crawl space of this house, all lined up completely. And I just said, let me just really get the hell away from this house. Let me get the hell away from this house. So years would go on. And I think like last year, I posted about this house. And my then boyfriend, he's actually a Facebook friend of mine on there. And he made a comment and he apologized. And I'm like, what? Why are you apologizing? First of all, we were supposed to be in the house in Phoenix City, and we ended up in this house here in Columbus, Georgia. That was not his fault. We were tired. We didn't feel like going to the other house, even though, the landlord at the time was like, "Oh, it's not too far. You can go see this house." I wish we had, because it was literally like 2 blocks over, just in Alabama, which, the what do you call that? The borderline or whatever. I wish we had of. He apologized because he told me what was in the roof. Just want to say, around the time when I was still talking with the landlord during the eviction process, I remember I told him, I said, "What is up in the attic?" He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "What's going on in the attic?" And I remember him putting his hands, his fingers over his mouth, and he kind of squinted and looked at me. He said, "What's going on in there? What do you think is in there?" And I remember he said it kind of like with a little smirk, kind of like a little giggle. It was a little strange to me. It was strange to me then. I am not dramatizing it anymore. That's exactly what he did. So my ex did tell me that, he didn't receive anything from the statues, or from what I can recall, I don't believe he received anything. I don't think so. If so, he probably would have got them all. But the thing was, he did tell me that up in the attic, when I asked him how big the statues were, he said they were tall. I said, "Were they taller than me?" He said, "Yes, I'm 5'4". So I asked him, "Was they taller than you?" He is 6'2". So the statues had to be around 5'6", 5'7". I'm guesstimating that's how tall the statues were. But there was literally about 100 or more of them lined up in the attic. It was one of the smaller ones that I found in the crawl space that kind of freaked me out, that I saw. I'm not going to sit here and lie. I never saw what was in the attic. I never wanted to see what was in the attic. I believe whatever was in the attic was not meant for me to see. I'll just put it that way. And obviously, it wasn't meant for my ex, the one that slid down those steps. It wasn't meant for him to see either, because he was freaked out about it and never wanted to speak about it again, even though he tried to act like it wasn't that bad up there. So if Netflix or a Hollywood script came to me and they wanted to use my real life experiences in that house, and they wanted to, of course, make it all Hollywoodish and add some more stuff onto it and make it a Netflix special, and I agreed to it, of course people are going to judge. And there might be somebody that looks at my picture and they say, "Oh no, that did not happen to her. She just didn't have enough money to pay that rent and was making excuses to, I guess, get out the lease, huh? If I can't make the rent, I'm already out the lease." But it did happen to me. It did.